Today's topic, Prograde UHS-II cards. They're good. They're really good. And for the price point, extremely good, especially when you get them on sale. I mean, I jumped all in and went for it. Budgets, price points. We hit it out of the park. And I think you should too. Let's talk. Welcome back to another video. My name is Nikos. Today we're talking about the Prograde UHS-II card, 300 megabytes per second on the read, and of course 250 on the write. A little bit slower on the write than this card right here. This is the Sandisk UHS-II card, 300 megabytes per second on the read, and of course 260 on the write. Now, the question is, why not stick with the card that everybody recommends and everybody thinks is awesome, and the company that has been around on reliability with a 30 years, it's like a lifetime, but I think it's 30 years. If anything happens, they got you covered, and they do. If you contact them and you say, hey, there's something wrong with this, they got your back. Unless, of course, there's something fundamentally wrong with the product. Then you're just getting another fundamentally wrong product. They're not doing anything to fix it. And that's a big issue for me. Now, if you haven't watched my videos before, I would suggest you hit subscribe as I make more of these videos where I'm going to be comparing this card with the Sandisk in more detail. And of course, I'll be comparing the CFexpress card that I bought, stupidly, from Sandisk with the Angelbirds, and I'm going to be going into a little bit more of a conversation with something I'm testing right now with the Fire CUDA. This is all talk about data and the stuff we need as creators, and I think it's the most important part of what we're doing, and yet we don't talk about it. Now, I'll leave all the links below, and in this video, I'm focusing more on this card because I want to just answer some questions before I do that full review, because everybody keeps asking me questions that I think I don't need all the data for, and this is where we're going to show you a bit of the data, go through my thoughts and why I'm going with this card and why I went all in. Again, like I bought I bought like all these cards, like 6 of them. Now, workflow is the reason why you buy multiple cards. Now, if you're watching this, I'm not trying to show off. I need it for my workflow. I needed them. Now, why did I end up going with this card versus the Sandisk? Well, the Sandisk showed limitations, and I didn't know what it was about. And then what I wanted to do is make sure that those limitations aren't going to affect me as I move forward. Now, in the Canon R that I originally got that card for because I had a V30 card, I realized I need a V60 for the bit rate, and then I found the V90, and I got the V90 because it was on sale. The idea on that camera was fine. I didn't notice anything. But when you start to get into more higher end cameras, they demand more. And as they demand more, well, you need better cards. Now, this is where you see the, creatives out there or the people that are professionals using crappy cards. And I'm like, you're using that card? Like, aren't you scared the shoot's gonna go? Like, and they stare at you like you're an idiot. But I know the ending of that story. I know that ending. I've been there. They sit there and they go, oh my God, why did I not buy the more expensive, reliable card? That's the end of that story. I know it. I've been there and I've seen it. I've seen it. So, reliability, yes, Sandisk has been reliable. Sandisk has been great. However, there's limitations. And by reliable, like, nothing happens to them. And if they do, well, you send them in, they have a 30-year warranty, you get them back, and you're all good to go. By 30, I think it's like unlimited, but like, I think it's 30. And the problem is that when there's limitations in the cards, they don't fix them. They wait for the next iteration, or like they did from the 95 to the 175, they did proprietary stuff on it, and they're like, oh, if you don't have my Sandisk reader, then you won't be able to get the 175. It's like, so it's not working faster in the camera? Oh, I should have checked the fine print there. Huh. But with these guys, it's been very upfront. Now, the idea here was when I picked up the R6, I realized that there was something wrong with the card because it was taking too long for the camera to work when it's buffer filled. And I started analyzing that, and I started putting into perspective, well, what's the reality that's happening with that? So if you're using those Sandisk cards for something like video, you're going to be fine. But when it comes to the camera and pictures, this is where you get in a situation because you need to have your machine operating at maximum speed, and the card plays a big role in that. And you need to be focused on what are you going to do with that. Now, with the Canon R, in my workflow, it was great. I had one card, and I was always like scared something's going to happen. However, with the R6, I needed 2 cards. Now, there's a bottleneck issue there if both cards aren't operating at the same rate, or speed. So you want to make sure you buy 2 of the same so you don't have any issues. At the same time, I need about, 2 backups of that. So I need like, sorry, one backup. So I need to be able to switch. And I need 4 cards in total. But then I went and picked up the R5, and when I picked up the R5 as well, I started playing around with the CFexpress cards, and I'm like, well, that one is stupid camera. It doesn't even have 2 CFexpress cards, so now I have to go and buy another SD card. Now I could rotate between the two, but if I'm using the camera at the same time, or both cameras at the same time, then I'm gonna need more cards. So I was like, I gotta find the best for me on a budget that makes sense, and this is why I have a lot of cards, and B, why I chose to go with one brand, because I don't want to be limited by one or another card. Let me show you some data to help you in this process of decision making. Now, let's start off right off the bat with the R6 buffer recovery. The buffer recovery would be you holding down the button, taking a whole bunch of pictures, and then when the buffer fails, you let it go. How long will it take for it to empty? Now, most people will shoot in RAW or RAW in JPEG. Some people will shoot in C RAW. The idea here is that you are getting a little bit of a significant difference between the RAW and JPEG, but you know, when you need to save those like extra 2.5 seconds, then yeah, turn off the JPEG and just shoot in RAW. Now, the difference between RAW and C RAW is not that big, and the question is just file size. Do you really need to be shooting in C RAW? In my opinion, you know, the size of the R6 images, not a big deal. You should just shoot in RAW and get everything you need out of there. Now, when we're looking in terms of the dual, what you're seeing here is both cards are being recorded to, and it's not a significant increase. Like, I mean, it's almost the same. And you know, how can you not say to, you know, use a dual? Now, I've heard some people say that it's slow on dual recording, and I've never understood it when I'm using both the cards being the same and Prograde. Now, if you don't do that and say you're using one like the Sandisk, and this was the big issue with the Sandisk. And by big issue, I mean very big issue. Like, this is like night and day, night and day. Now, I talked about this in the other video about Sandisk. I'll leave that link below. And of course, subscribe for the comparison. And in that comparison, I will be talking between the speed differences and why you should be buying one or the other. And this is huge. Imagine waiting 23 seconds instead of 7.5 seconds. This is huge, guys. Like, I can't, I don't know how to explain this any, like, the visual says everything. 23 seconds with a Sandisk. Now, what is happening here? Well, you have a Sandisk and you have a Prograde. It's gonna default back to the slowest card because you can only, it's a bottleneck. You can only record to the fastest card, and then you gotta wait for the slowest card for that buffer to empty. Now, when we're looking at in terms of the R5, the recovery time is a little bit more, but I mean, you're using bigger images, and because you're using bigger images, you're gonna have to, you know, deal with that buffer emptying slower. So the idea here then becomes, well, what happens when you're using the Angelbird and you're doing a dual record? Well, if you're using the Progrades, you get a faster empty here, but when you're using the Sandisk, well, guess what? You're back in that same situation. It will take longer for this to empty, which means you're going to be able to use your card almost right away, but you're not going to be able to use it to its full capabilities until this fully empties. Now, comparing the R, the R6, and the R5, what we see here is 3 different cameras with different size sensors and different size images that are being captured. The almost 30 megapixel, or it is 30 megapixels on the R, is 8.2 seconds to empty that buffer, where the R6, which is 20, it's 6.71. And then the 45 on the R5 is 11.3 seconds. So, I mean, you're seeing the significance there. And when you see the significance, you have to put that into perspective, that when you're switching between cameras, you're going to have that expectation on that size. Now, when we're comparing the R and we're saying, okay, how long is, or what's the difference in the buffer? And this is where you're not going to see the difference if you buy one or the other card. It's negligible. You're not going to notice a difference here at all. It's 11 seconds versus 8.2, like, you know, almost 12 seconds versus, 8, you know, close to 8.5 seconds here. So say when you're doing this, like, that's what it's going to feel like. You're not going to notice the difference here. Now, you might in the JPEG with the RAW, but not that much, because it's going to, you know, it's going to empty, and you're going to be like, okay, it emptied, you know, whoop-de-doo. Which is why when you purchase a card like this and you're just using a Canon R or something that is in that range of cameras, you're not going to get the maximum speed out of it, and you're not going to know the difference, because it's not going to be like lightning fast, and you're gonna be like, oh my God, but you are gonna see the difference. And yes, you're gonna see it in your workflow. You're gonna see it when you're transferring files over. So the card is good, but it's good for that kind of setup where you're not gonna notice the big differences. And then you get into the higher end cameras like the R6 and the R5, which need more demand out of cards like this one, and this one performs. And this is big, this is important. We want it to perform. We want things to work good. Now, there are more to this than just these stats I showed you. There's more to it than just all of this conversation we have so far. I'm gonna do a bigger review so you can see the difference between the two. And this isn't to say that the Prograde are a better card from every other card maker. I haven't tested every other card maker, and I haven't seen many people test the way I test, and that's because it's my workflow. And I know other people have workflows, but I mean, I don't know what everybody's workflow is, but a lot of this time, I'm looking at the scenario that I'm in, and I'm like, why didn't anybody notice this? Why hasn't anybody said this? You go online to look for bad reviews on the Sandisk, you don't see that many. And when you do, they're kind of stupid reviews. And at the same time, when you go on Amazon, you go all these like different websites, you're going to buy something, they don't have a lot of negativity. Everybody's like, yeah, it works great. And of course it's going to work great in an R or a T7i. Somebody who spent a little bit more than they should have for one of those cameras. But then I see these other people that are using it in their R6 and then their R5, and I'm like, how? And how can they be recommending it? Now, here's the caveat to this. I have a buddy who's got an R5, you know, and I was like, he's like, oh, it's so sluggish. And he thought it was a camera. He didn't think it was a card. And, you know, I've had these scenarios where I'm just kind of like, wait a minute. What is occurring here? And let's really test things out. Now, I'm testing out the Fire CUDA right now. Okay, so do hit subscribe on that because it's all about workflow. And I found some issues that for creators, not for gamers. But this thing, it's a great drive. But is it for us? Now, this goes to the Sandisk. Is it good for us? Not sure, depending on the camera you're using. And for me, I went in all Prograde because it's getting the job done. Now, could the Sonys be better? Probably. They're more expensive. I haven't used one, though, to test out. I've used one in real world, and I didn't notice anything, kind of like I didn't notice anything with the Sandisk. So, I mean, you got to test these things to see it. But when you switch cameras, you'd really see things for what they are. And the idea here is future-wise. Now, I wanted to make this specific so you understand. The Prograde is at a good price point. There's like 3 different SD card makers that are really good, and they're expensive, you know, like the Sonys, you know, they're expensive. And I could have tested all of them. But my idea here is very simple. If I test all of these, then where does it end, for one? 2, price point. And what happens when I go to the next camera and the next camera? So I'm testing the CFexpress cards so that I can make these videos so you're aware of what's happening on one end. On the other end, I'm looking at the R5C that came out, and I'm like, do I really need that? Or am I going to wait for the next round? And in the next round, I think the R5s and the R6s, maybe not the R6s, but the R5s for sure, will have, like the MK2s, will have 2 CFexpress cards, no more SD cards. So the question is, should I be spending that much money? Because that becomes a spend, not an investment. Where right now, this is a good investment for me. I need these. It's workflow. And at a price point that's so convenient, oh my God, like these things were on sale massively. So it was just like, man, but I kept it open for 2 cards to see if I can find anything else that would work well. And those 2 cards, I would pair them together if I were going to buy anything else. Now I kind of regret it. However, maybe I find one that does this like, you know, even faster. And you're like, okay, well, then Progrades were a mistake. But I doubt it. I doubt it. Like it's going to be faster, yes, but not like significant where I'm going to regret it. I should have said it that way. So overall, I think Prograde in this case, based on budget, based on the speed and the results I got, based on what I was expecting and comparing that to the Sandisk, based on what I've been seeing on the reviews, based on my future and my workflow, this was all the things I was looking at, and it was the best decision for me. I encourage you to do the same with whatever purchases you're making, but put in mind the things I talked about in this video so that you can be looking at them when you're making purchases. Because if I hear one more person tell me that Sandisk is amazing, and like I went and bought all in on Sandisk because I'm a creator, because I watched the other creator, I'm gonna, like, you know, I'm gonna start calling out people. Maybe not. I'm just gonna shake my head still, because like, what's the point? Just move on and go create content and do what you need to do so you can get moving in the right direction, right? Don't be bitter, but man, it's annoying, isn't it? Anyways, leave your comment below on these cards, what's been your experience. What about what people are saying about the different cards? And of course, watch these 2 videos and subscribe for the next comparing video between the Prograde and the Sandisk. And watch these 2 videos, especially this one.